Hi everyone! Today we're going to have a look at 4.1 and it's all about square roots. So, do you remember anything about square roots? First of all, we're going to have a look at multiplying square roots. So, the square root of 4 times the square root of 9. Do we all remember that the square root of 4 is equal to 2 and the square root of 9 is equal to 3? Because 2 times 2 equals 3 and 3 times 3 equals 9. The answer is 6. However, there's another way to multiply square roots. And you can see that in this case. The square root of 4 times the square root of 9 is the same as the square root of 4 times 9, which is the square root of 36, which is also equal to 6. So this is also equal to 6. We have a rule for it. So the square root of a times the square root of b is the same as the square root of a times b, which is the square root of ab. Please write this down in your notebook and highlight it. But what about taking the square of a square root? When we have the square root of 13 squared, we know that we need to multiply the square root by itself. So we get the square root of 13 times the square root of 13, which is the square root of 169, which is equal to 13. However, there is another rule for this as well. Since the square root of 13 squared is the same as 13, please remember that the square root and the squares are opposites of each other. So if we do them together, they cancel each other out. So we just get 13. Therefore, we have another row. The square root of a squared is the same as a. Please highlight this in your notebook as well. When we're going to take the square of a squared number, so for instance 13 squared and then the square root of it, is the same as the square root of 13 times 13, which was 169, which was 13 as well. So over here we have the same row. It doesn't matter which order it is. The square root and the square, they cancel each other out, so we get 13. So please make sure that you write this row in your notebook as well and you highlight it with a different color. Alright, some more examples for multiplication. If we have the square root of 2 times the square root of 32, we get a square root of 64. Because you did 2 times 32. And that's 8. Now you can see why it's really useful to know this rule, since we cannot multiply, we cannot answer the square root of 2, and we cannot answer the square root of 32, but when we multiply them together, we can. The same works for 2 times the square root of 3 times 4 times the square root of 21. Please remember that between a number and a square root, that there is an invisible multiplication sign. That means that we're going to multiply the numbers, so 2 times 4, which is 8, and the square roots, so the square root of 3 times the square root of 21, which is 8 times the square root of 63. We're not done yet, since we can split up, we can simplify, so split up our square root of 63. In order to do that, you need to remember the following kind of a rule. What we know is that the square root of 1 is equal to 1, the square root of 4 is equal to 2, the square root of 9 is equal to 3, the square root of 16 is equal to 4, the square root of 25 is equal to 5, the square root of 36 is equal to 6, square root of 49 is equal to 7, and so on. You must know this sequence by heart, because I'm going to choose some numbers that are in our left row, so they are over there, because we know that those square roots give like a nice answer. We can split up 63 in 9 and in 7, so what we get is 8 times the square root of 9 times 7, We can split those up again. And we know the square root of 9 equals 3. And 8 times 3 is 24. So we get 24 times the square root of 7, which is your final answer. But how about adding square roots? When we have 3 square root of 7 plus 2 square root of 7, we get 5 times the square root of 7. Please, please, please remember the letters. We can say 3a plus 2a, which is 5a because the a's are like terms. With square roots, it works exactly the same. How about 4 times the square root of 3 plus the square root of 3 plus the square root of 5? Please first highlight the like terms, so which squares are the same. And then we know the other answer must be 5 square root of 3 plus the square root of 5. How does that work with subtracting square roots? Well, that actually works the same as adding. So what we do is that we have 5 square root of 7 minus 3 square root of 7. It's the same as 2 times the square root of 7. Since we do just 5 minus 3, I would just stick the square root of 7 behind it. When we have 7 times the square root of 6 minus 3 minus 2 square root of 3 minus square root of 2, first simplify 6 minus 3. So what you get is 7 square root of 3 minus 2 square root of 3 minus square root of 2. When you highlight the like terms with a different color to make it more easy for yourself, you see that those two are the like terms. 7 minus 2 is 5. We just take the square root of 3 behind it and we copy our minus square root of 2. Well, what about the negative square roots? What do we know about the square root of minus 9? It has no answer. But why? When we have the square root, so the normal square root of 9, we know that it's 3, since 3 times 3 equals 9. But how about the square root of minus 9? We cannot multiply any number by itself to get a negative answer, so that's why you cannot take a square root of a negative number. It doesn't exist. How can we calculate the square roots with fractions? When we have the square root of 9 over 25, we can split it up in the square root of 9 over the square root of 25, which is 3 over 5. When we have the square root of 2 1/4, we must first make it one fraction, so 9 over 4, which we can split up in the square root of 9 divided by the square root of 4, which is 3 over 2. And now pay attention because we can still simplify 3 over 2 in 1 over 2. Another example of the square roots with negative numbers, you can take a square root of just a number when there is a negative in front of it, since it is actually a -1. Alright, so those were all the examples of square root, so all the rules, so make sure that you practice a lot and that you write all the examples down in your notebook. The more you practice, the better you will get this. If you have any questions, you must ask it now.